FactWire Report. Trump pushes Congress to block state AI rules. A judge freezes his National Guard deployment in D.C. September hiring beats while unemployment ticks up. U.S. banks shelve a $20 Argentina rescue. U.S. President Donald Trump is backing an aggressive push to limit how individual states regulate artificial intelligence, aligning the White House closely with the tech industry's campaign against what it sees as a patchwork of rules. The administration is working with congressional allies to insert language into a must-pass defense bill that would preempt emerging state AI laws in places like California and New York. These state proposals aim to make companies more accountable for harms caused by AI systems, including biased outcomes, privacy risks, and potential safety failures. Technology firms argue that a growing maze of state-level requirements could slow innovation and raise compliance costs, especially for systems deployed nationwide. According to people familiar with the talks, White House AI and crypto advisor David Sachs and House Majority Leader Steve Scalise are among those pressing to add the preemption measure to the annual defense authorization bill. Their goal is to cement a single national framework for AI oversight, with the federal government taking the lead and states having less room to experiment with their own rules. At the same time, the administration has circulated a draft executive order that would give the Justice Department a clearer path to challenge state AI laws in court. A version of the draft, reported by policy outlets, is titled Eliminating State Law Obstruction of National AI Policy. It would direct federal agencies to treat AI as a strategic priority for national competitiveness and to oppose state measures seen as conflicting with that goal. Supporters say a unified national standard could give companies more certainty and help the United States compete with rivals like China and the European Union, which are also advancing broad AI rules. They argue that large differences between state laws could make it difficult to deploy AI systems at scale, particularly for cloud services and consumer applications used across the country. Industry groups have also warned that strict liability provisions at the state level could discourage investment in new AI tools. Critics, including some state lawmakers and civil society groups, counter that the plan would undercut local efforts to protect residents from real harms. They point to worries over deep fakes in elections, automated decisions in housing and hiring, and AI-generated scams that can target vulnerable communities. For these opponents, states are closer to voters and better positioned to respond quickly when new technologies cause problems in specific industries or regions. The debate over who should set the rules for AI now sits at the intersection of technology, federal power, and states' rights. If Congress adopts the defense bill language and the executive order goes forward, the federal government could gain new tools to challenge or override state laws, reshaping how AI is governed in the United States. If those efforts stall, states are likely to keep testing their own approaches, and companies may have to navigate a more fragmented regulatory map for years to come. While Washington debates how to regulate artificial intelligence, another test of federal power is unfolding just a few blocks away. A federal judge has stepped in to review President Donald Trump's decision to deploy National Guard troops in the nation's capital. A federal judge in Washington, D.C., has delivered a significant legal setback to President Trump's push to use National Guard troops in the nation's capital over the objections of local leaders. Judge Gia Cobb issued an order that would halt the deployment unless it is approved by the city's mayor, adding fresh limits to how far the White House can go in sending military forces into U.S. cities. The ruling came in a lawsuit brought by Washington, D.C. Attorney General Brian Schwalb, who argued that Trump violated federal law and the city's limited self-governing powers by deploying Guard troops without local consent. The complaint said the move broke long-standing restrictions on using federal forces for domestic policing and effectively punished the Democratic-led city for disagreeing with the president's policies. Judge Cobb agreed that the deployment raised serious legal questions about the balance between public safety and local control. Her order would block Trump from continuing the mission in the Capitol unless the mayor signs off. At the same time, she paused the effect of her decision until December 11th, giving the administration a window to appeal. That means the legal confrontation is very much ongoing, and the final outcome will likely hinge on higher courts. The Trump administration has defended the National Guard operations in Washington and other cities as lawful and necessary, saying the deployments have helped reduce crime and address security concerns. Officials argue that the president has broad authority to respond when they believe local governments are not doing enough to protect residents. Critics say that framing overlooks the limits Congress placed on using troops inside the United States and risks turning security decisions into tools of political pressure. The case in Washington is part of a wider pattern of legal challenges to Trump's domestic deployments. Similar lawsuits have been filed in cities like Los Angeles, Chicago, and Portland, where local officials objected to federal forces being sent in over their objections. Courts have sometimes sided with local leaders, but not always. An appeals court, for example, allowed the Guard to remain in Los Angeles while the case there proceeds. The D.C. ruling adds another layer of uncertainty to how much freedom presidents have in this area. For residents of the capital, the dispute is about more than one operation. Washington, D.C. is not a state, and its leaders have long pushed for more control over local decisions. The lawsuit argues that being forced to accept Guard deployments without consent undermines that limited autonomy. Supporters of the ruling see it as a step toward reinforcing local authority, while opponents worry it could weaken tools they view as important for addressing crime and large-scale events. As the appeal moves forward, the case will continue to test the boundaries between federal power, local democracy, and the use of military forces in civilian settings. The outcome could shape how future presidents from either party approach security in cities that disagree with their agenda and how courts interpret the rules that are meant to keep the military's role in domestic life clearly defined and limited.
As courts in Washington debate the reach of presidential power, a different kind of measure is taking shape in the data. The latest U.S. jobs report shows solid hiring in September, but also an unexpected rise in the unemployment rate. The latest U.S. jobs report delivered a mixed message about the strength of the economy. In September, non-farm payrolls grew by about 119,000 jobs, a pace that beat economists' expectations and pointed to continued hiring across key parts of the labor market. At the same time, the unemployment rate climbed to 4.4%, the highest level in roughly 4 years, underscoring that the recovery remains uneven. According to the Labor Department, hiring was led by healthcare, which added around 43,000 positions, reflecting ongoing demand for medical services. Leisure and hospitality companies, along with retailers, also continued to expand their payrolls as consumers spent on travel, dining, and shopping. Those gains, however, were partly offset by job losses in manufacturing, transportation, warehousing, and the federal government, where employers have been cutting back amid cost pressures and shifting priorities. One reason the unemployment rate moved higher is that more people are looking for work again. The report showed that roughly 470,000 individuals entered the labor force in September, but only about 251,000 of them found jobs. That increase in participation is often a sign of confidence as people return to job hunting, yet it can push the jobless rate up in the short term when hiring does not fully keep pace. Median unemployment duration also edged up to about 10 weeks, suggesting that some workers are taking longer to find new positions. Economists say the labor market is being reshaped by several forces at once. Employers are adjusting to higher import tariffs and to the growing use of artificial intelligence in everyday operations. In some cases, companies are consolidating roles or redesigning entry-level positions, making it harder for recent graduates and lower experienced workers to secure their first job. At the same time, lower immigration has reduced the pool of available workers in certain industries, adding another layer of complexity to hiring decisions. Wage growth remained relatively steady, with average earnings rising at about 3.8% annual rate. That pace is slower than the peak seen earlier in the cycle, but still ahead of some measures of inflation, offering households a modest cushion. For the Federal Reserve, the new data adds to a delicate policy debate. A labor market that is cooling but still generating jobs may argue for caution rather than rapid changes in interest rates, and at least one major Wall Street bank has already stepped back from its forecast of a rate cut in December. For workers and businesses, the numbers highlight an economy at a crossroads. Job growth has not stalled, but it is no longer delivering the broad, rapid gains seen earlier in the expansion. Sectors tied to services and healthcare are providing many of the new opportunities, while parts of manufacturing and logistics remain under pressure from changing trade patterns and technology. How employers respond over the next few months and how policymakers interpret this mix of strength and softness will play a major role in determining whether the labor market can stay resilient without tipping into a more pronounced slowdown. While Americans watch the labor market for clues about the next move from the Federal Reserve, another financial story is unfolding far from Washington. A group of major U.S. banks has stepped back from a proposed $20 billion support package for Argentina's economy. A group of major U.S. banks has stepped back from a headline-making plan to provide a $20 billion loan package to Argentina, shifting instead towards a much smaller short-term facility. According to reporting based on Wall Street Journal coverage and confirmed by Reuters, J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, and Citigroup no longer see the original bank-led bailout as a serious option. The $20 billion facility was designed to sit alongside a separate $20 billion exchange rate stabilization agreement between Argentina and the U.S. Treasury, announced in October as part of a broader effort to support the country's currency and financial system. Together, the two arrangements would have represented a $40 billion show of confidence in Argentina's reform agenda under President Javier Milei, who has pursued a market-oriented program to tackle high inflation and low foreign reserves. Bankers now say the large loan is off the table, at least for the moment. Instead, they are discussing a roughly $5 billion repo facility that would give Argentina shorter-term access to dollars and help cover about $4 billion in debt coming due in January. A repo structure allows a country to raise cash by temporarily pledging assets as collateral, with the understanding that the transaction will be reversed later. Negotiations over the size, terms, and collateral for the new package are still at an early stage and could change or fall through. The shift follows weeks of hesitation from some banks about putting so much capital at risk without clearer guarantees. Earlier reporting indicated that lenders wanted more detail on what Argentina could pledge as collateral and whether Washington might backstop part of the exposure. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has been a strong public supporter of the wider rescue effort, and the administration of President Donald Trump has framed its backing for Milei as part of a broader strategy to deepen economic ties with key partners in the region. For Argentina, the change in plan is a reminder of both progress and vulnerability. Inflation has begun to ease from previous peaks, and the currency has found more stability since the October announcement. But foreign reserves remain limited, and the government still faces a demanding schedule of debt payments. A smaller bank facility would offer some immediate relief, while leaving the broader financing challenge unresolved. Officials in Buenos Aires have not commented publicly on the latest reports, and the full shape of the support package is still in flux. For investors, the story is another example of how large, high-profile rescue deals can evolve as conditions change. A full $20 billion bank loan would have sent a strong signal about confidence in Argentina's path, but it also carried significant risk for lenders. A more modest repo facility may be easier to structure and quicker to deliver, while still aligning with the U.S. government's goal of helping a key regional economy manage its external obligations. That was FactWire Report. If this saved you time, subscribe, tap the bell, and like. Comment: AI rules fight, guard ruling, job surprise, or Argentina's bailout pause, which matters most now? Share with one market friend. We post concise, verified news daily. See you tomorrow. Stay to the end. Our closing chart turns headlines into signals so you act faster, calmer, smarter.